Hello and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We're going through the Genesis catalog and we've made it all the way up to Wind and Wuthering. This is the second album by the four-man lineup of the group. We've got Phil Collins on lead vocals and drums, Steve Hackett on guitar, Mike Rutherford on bass, and Tony Banks on the keyboards. Kind of an underrated record in a lot of ways. I think it's largely overshadowed by Trick of the Tail. I'm pretty much constantly in debate. I mean, I really don't know which one I like better. I think I like Trick of the Tail better, because I mean, they are sister albums. Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering are very, very similar. So usually in that instance, the first of the two similar albums usually gets the win because it was the first one. I think Trick of the Tail it's structured a little bit better than Wind and Wuthering, but there's songs on Wind and Wuthering that I think are much better than the songs on Trick of the Tail. There's a few really, really, really strong Genesis moments on here. So yeah, I'm in a constant state of flux. I don't know which is better. Lovely album cover. It's very early Genesis, whimsical. You get the nice tree in here and lovely font. You flip it over and the tree was all birds. It's lovely. And then of course the inner sleeve. It's floppy right now. I've got my nice clean vinyl and a fresh sleeve. Yeah, you get some nice lyrics in that. Pretty cool. Yeah, Steve Hackett has a huge contribution on this album. I think the highlights of Steve Hackett's contribution to Genesis is probably Selling England by the Pound and Wind and Wuthering. Hackett has a couple of very, very key moments on both of those records. Can't get this sleeve back in now. My gosh, how cumbersome! How cumbersome. I might have to wait till later, or before your very eyes. I might get it. No, it's not gonna happen. Tony Banks is still dominating a lot of the writing. He's got a few huge moments on here, or at least one, really. Not two. I'd say two. Collins, he's settling into the singer role, but he still hasn't quite found himself as a singer. He's still, just kind of singing the notes, which is fine. It suits this period of Genesis, because it was still very progressive, obviously. It's a very slow, gradual change between, Selling England and Lamb Lies Down to, Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance. It wasn't overnight, and they're still very much in the prog mindset at this point. Yeah, I mean they're all writing still, so let's get on to the tracks, shall we? Side 1 opens with 11th Earl of Mar. And again, I think this is one of those hugely underrated tracks by Genesis. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of Selling England. Again, they're trying to make that ultimate Genesis record. They're referring back to what they did before. But it's got 11th Earl of Mar has these. There's like a sequence of there's different parts that are all layered, very thematic. A lot of drastic changes. That's one of Hackett's moments, is the middle section with classical guitar and whatnot. Yeah, it's a really, really strong opener. Probably like it more than Watch Where the Skies, and I really like Watch Where the Skies, so yeah, great track, great opener. Then we get One for the Vine. This is the obligatory Tony Banks mega number, and I think it's probably, again, it's underrated. I also think it's one of the best songs that this four-man lineup of Genesis did. It's very good. It's quite light. I mean, Genesis are typically quite light, but this song feels particularly so. It's almost like chamber music in places. It's got that nice little Hackett line at the start with, playing in unison with the piano. That comes back a couple of times. And the middle section is really, really fun, where they got like the duck sound and the yeah, it's really good. Great playing as well, obviously. Collins is still on absolute top form with his drumming. And yeah, really strong pair of songs at the front of the album. And then we get to track 3, and I think, you know, if I'm ever in the mood where Trick of the Tail is definitely better than Wind and Wuthering, it's because of this song, Your Own Special Way. I really, really don't like this song. You know, it's the first time I think that they put a song that is, you know, very consciously a love song. Well, no, I guess More Fool Me is certainly a love song of sorts, but I mean, this is the first cheesy one that they did. It's a Mike Rutherford song. He wrote the whole thing. And I mean, it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't 6 minutes. I mean, no sappy song should stay that long. And I think what really bums me out about it is the little middle section in the middle. It's like that little lullaby. Do 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 do. It's just it's a low point on the album for me. And it's the first time in the catalog where you think, but there are a lot of people that like it. So what do I know? It's not my taste. The album closes with Wot Gorilla, which is it's kind of like a Los Endos kind of a thing. It's got the fusion influence, which is fantastic. I forgot to mention last video with the Trick of the Tail tour, they got Bill Bruford to fill in the drum roll because obviously Collins was singing, and that's really cool. There's some video of that. The one tour Bruford did with Genesis. It's fantastic. And for this album, and subsequently all of the touring they did afterwards, they got Chester Thompson, who is in Frank Zappa's band, and there's a Chester's Gorilla reference, part of Zappa's conceptual continuity. And I think they put Wot Gorilla in there as kind of a funny nod to that, because obviously, you know, everyone, any good musician at that time had to have known that Zappa was, you know, a master, and they were keeping tabs with what he was up to. The song is really good. Like I said, it's got that fusion-y kind of a thing. And not a lot of people know there's actually a reference to One for the Vine. The main melody of Wot Gorilla, do 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 do. That's kind of a variation on the melody that's in the middle section of One for the Vine. So that's kind of cool. There's a lot of little thematic cues to this album that kind of link it all together. It's not a concept album, but you know, musically there's a lot of linkage, which is cool. Then we flip the album over, we get All in a Mouse's Night. This I like a lot more than Robbery, Assault, and Battery. It's the same idea, you know, it's Collins trying to do the funny voices and whatnot, and there's like different characters to the songs, or to the different characters in each of the verses, rather. And yeah, it's really fun. This story is kind of silly. It's all the obstacles that a mouse has to go through in order to survive, and it's cute. And then it ends with this little march at the end, which is cool. And that leads us into Blood on the Rooftops, which is the other significant Steve Hackett contribution to Genesis. And I think it is one of my all-time favorite Genesis songs. It's one of those songs. It's so good you don't want to listen to it too much because I don't want to oversaturate the feeling that you get from it when you hear it. But yeah, Blood on the Rooftops is gorgeous. You know, nice little bit of classical guitar, obviously courtesy of Hackett. Got a great intro to it, and very silly lyrics. I think Collins wrote the lyrics, and they're quite silly and nonsensical, but very very English again. It's the last time I think there's like a quintessential Englishness to what Genesis was doing, and that's Blood on the Rooftops. And the chorus is just beautiful too. And then there's a line to Watching the Queen on Christmas Day, and so it's kind of like a Christmas song for me. You know, whenever the Christmas vibe is going on, I got to throw Blood on the Rooftops on, and watch the snow. It's lovely. Oh. So probably the best song on the album for me. One for the Vine comes close, but Blood on the Rooftops, just magnificent. Then we get Unquiet, Slumbers for the Sleepers, In That Quiet Earth. First part's the quiet part, second part's the loud part. It is the obligatory big instrumental at the end of the album, the big instrumental wind-up, and it's a really good one. I think this one, I mean, they're all really good. I mean, obviously the Cinema Show is the one on Selling England. Los Endos, I mean, that's the flagship one, but that's the flagship instrumental at the end of the album kind of thing. But I think Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers, In That Quiet Earth is better than Los Endos. I mean, it could well be the best one they did. I think it starts out with the classical guitar and this really kind of mysterious synth line, very windy and wuthering-y. And again, it builds into this awesome fusion kind of a thing, and Collins is on fire, and the whole band's on fire. Goes into this big slow part that it's great, and it also carries on the theme of bringing back the beginning of the album. Again, I don't think a lot of people really notice it, but the very start of the album, the very beginning of 11th Earl of Mar, that comes up at the end of In That Quiet Earth, but it's like full blown and crazy awesome fusion style. So that's cool. Again, classic Genesis album trait. And then we wind up with Afterglow. This is probably the famous song for the album, and at least in that they played it live pretty well, quite a long time afterwards. This is the other big Tony Banks moment, but it's not like a typical Tony Banks song, really. It's mainly a guitar thing, and it sounds a lot like "Wish You a Merry Little Christmas." There's an interview that I saw Tony Banks where he mentioned that, and I think, oh my god, it's true. It is very close. It's different, but it's very close. I never used to like it so much at the start, but it's one that grows on you. It's kind of it's soft, but it's still anthemic. There's got that anthem kind of quality to it. Yeah, great closer. Not the best song on the album. That's probably either One for the Vine, Blood on the Rooftops, as I said, and possibly Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers in That Quiet Earth. That is a fantastic instrumental. Yeah, there it is, Genesis, Wind and Wuthering. An overshadowed album. It's an often overlooked one, and as is the case for a lot of sister albums. Like I said, it's tied closely to Trick of the Tail, and it's overshadowed by that one because that's the first one. But it's a great album. I think it's fantastic. They also did an EP after this of a couple of songs that didn't fit onto here, called Spot the Pigeon, and that's got Match of the Day, Spot the Pigeon, and Inside and Out, which Match of the Day and Spot the Pigeon are kind of an indicator that they were starting to look into the shorter, poppier songs. They already did that. I mean, obviously they had I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe from Selling England. I mean, that was kind of a silly poppy song. So those two songs are similar to that, I think. It's nothing spectacular. But Inside and Out from Spot the Pigeon is a really cool track, because it's got the big Tony Banks extravaganza solo at the end, and it's a cool song at the beginning. So that's kind of worth checking out, those songs. The other thing worth mentioning, obviously, is Seconds Out, because this is the final studio album that Steve Hackett was on. And I mean, like I said, he left with a bang. I mean, there's a lot of Hackett on here, which is great. But Seconds Out is notable, because I think that's probably the definitive album for the four-man lineup of Genesis. And it's got a live version of Supper's Ready, although it's got Phil Collins on vocals, and he does a very good job of it, but it's got to be Gabriel for Supper's Ready, It's got to be. But Collins did a good job. So yeah, I may do Seconds Out one of these days, but I'm going to stick with the studio albums for now. So next thing I'm doing is going to be And Then There Were Three. So we'll see you then.